Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill Game of the Week vibes. Georgia heading on the road to play Texas. And if I were to give kind of a surface level take on this football game before we get into the weeds here, it'd be this. Like Texas, every single time they've taken the football field in 2024, like they've looked like a national championship caliber team. You look at Georgia and say, you've seen the flashes of a national championship caliber team, right? Go to the second half of Alabama, go to the second half of Clemson, who I think is a very good team. You know, this Georgia team is capable of playing very good football. But what we're not used to saying with Kirby Smart and this Georgia Bulldogs program is it's been inconsistent. It's been inconsistent a lot in 2024. Georgia has every ability to go on the road and beat the number one team in the country in Texas. Can they put it all together for 4 quarters? That's going to be the question in this football game. And I think you got some really intriguing matchups, starting with the head coaches, right? One of the best defensive minds going up against one of the best offensive minds. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do it, as always, I think most importantly, let it fly in the comment section. I think there are a lot of different ways that you can look at this football game. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys as we've done these preview and prediction episodes, it's been amazing. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. Dill, let's get into this one. I think you got to start with this Texas offense against a Georgia defense that I want to talk about. Two things I want to see better. And let's start with something that I don't think a ton of Georgia fans are talking about, but I think it's certainly present with this Georgia defense. Gotta get some difference makers stepping up on the defensive line. I get there has been some problems in the secondary. We are certainly going to talk about those problems. But I look at Georgia's front seven and say, we're used to looking at Georgia's front seven and say, it's smothering, it's swarming. It's really hard for offenses to get to their things with how disrupted this defensive line has been. Look at the game against Mississippi State. 0 sacks, only 3 tackles for a loss. Take a look at the year, only sacking the quarterback 4.8% of the time. That's 86th in the country. This is an underlying, I wouldn't say problem, but question I want to see answered for Georgia. I think you got the dudes on the defensive line to have some game records. They need to play this way against a very, very good Texas offensive line Saturday night here.
Especially because I don't think they're going to be able to rely on the blitz as much or be sending pressure from their back end and their
Yeah.
linebackers as much as they have in the past. Because you look at how good Texas offensive line is at picking that stuff up and how well they communicate with each other. We've been saying it. They've built that offensive line the right way, just like Georgia's built it the right way. And you see that on the field. They communicate really well. They don't have missed and blown assignments. And I think that's like when, like, okay, well, in that case, Georgia just needs to win their one-on-ones. And they have guys who've done it. I mean, Jalen Walker, to me, has been a really, really good pass rusher for this team. Ingram Dawkins, I think, has played really good as well. So that Georgia's had some guys who have flashed some moments. I think they need to do a better job of consistently getting them in positions, getting them in good matchups, and letting them go try to get after it. Because I think you're right. They have been not particularly great getting pressure on the quarterback, but also it seems like at times been a little reliant on sending pressure from the back.
Yeah, and it's important to win with your front four and not have to send pressure for a couple of different reasons. One, I think you said it right. Like this Texas offensive line has NFL caliber guys. I think the bigger storyline is that they've all played together for so many years outside of Cam Williams at that right tackle spot. You can tell like their chemistry in terms of pass protection and assignments and picking up blitzes. It's been elite. It's really hard to blitz this Texas offensive line with how good that chemistry and communication is up front. I think more importantly, if you're Georgia, I don't think you feel very comfortable rolling your safeties into the box and kind of leaving your cornerbacks on islands, because that's kind of a segue into the second problem we've seen with this Georgia team. These cornerbacks are struggling massively at making plays with the football in the air. They're giving up explosives. That's something we're not used to saying with this Georgia defense. And you're going up against an offense with Coach Sark, who I personally think is the best in the country at dialing up explosive plays, giving you different looks, finding his matchups. I think a really big storyline here, Dale, is if Isaiah Bond is ready to rock and roll, right? He left that game against Oklahoma with an ankle injury. He is that electric wide receiver that allows Texas to push the ball down the field, game-breaking speed. Georgia fans certainly know that from his time at Alabama, but you're also having a ton of other guys step up, right? Ryan Wingo, true freshman, another name that Georgia fans certainly know from the recruiting trail days. Gunnar Helmet, tight end. The second
Golden
storyline
played a
is,
great game. I think that was a big thing. Is Golden was kind of a guy I think you were waiting to see
yep,
break out. looked really, really good, I thought, against Oklahoma. So I think you are starting to see this wide receiver room round out a little bit more. For a little bit of the season, I do think it did feel a little reliant, frankly, on Helm and Isaiah Bond to make things happen. But I think as the seasons progress, the kid from Oregon State actually had a really, really good game too. So I think
Silas,
you're
yeah.
starting to see the rest of that group kind of come along. Those transfers come in and start making some things happen and be a little bit more comfortable in that offense.
I think the last storyline for this Texas offense versus this Georgia defense would be Quinn Ewers. We were both we're Michigan fans. We watched Quinn Ewers come to Ann Arbor and just completely dice up our defense. This kid has taken a step, and I think it was massive to get him back against Oklahoma, where you could afford not having a great first quarter. It was very clear that Quinn Ewers, I wouldn't use the word like gun shy, but a little shaky, a little rusty, right? Missed some throws that we are not used to seeing Quinn miss. After he settled in, like he was elite. And again, when he has clean pockets, he's going to pick you apart. Getting him back, letting him shake the rust off before this Georgia defense comes to town, I think that was massive for Texas. Now,
And
flipping the
that's
sides,
why it's so important for them to get after the passers. That has been the one thing that at times has given Quinn Ewers problems is
yes,
getting
yeah,
pressure, especially right into the middle, because he has been prone to taking sacks. And not this year; those numbers are
big,
way down. But
yeah,
last year he took a zillion sacks. It felt like, and that was with a really good offensive line. So again, Georgia, to me, I think they're going to need to win more one-on-one matchups on the inside and on the outside with their front four than what we've seen from them. Because again, if they can't heat Quinn Ewers up, I just don't see how that secondary hangs out
yeah,
well with that Texas offense. Because Quinn
yeah.
Ewers, when he's got time, he's really playing well
And
right
I
now.
will give you, you kind of noted it, but I want to double down on it. Like Quinn Ewers and his pocket manipulation and extending plays. It's a small sample size because we haven't seen him play a ton of football this year with the injury. It was really impressive against Michigan. He's going to need to look like that against Georgia as well. They'll flipping sides. And again, we were just very hard on this Georgia defense. And I think a lot of Georgia fans have been critical of this Georgia defense too. The standard for Georgia over the last couple of years has been best defense in the country caliber standard. It hasn't been that. And I think a lot of Georgia fans know that the talent's there. So we were a little critical there. I want to give Georgia their flowers on offense, though. We had big time question marks about Carson Beck and what he could be as a quarterback without guys like Brock and Ladd. And it was shaky the last couple of games that we've seen Carson play. I thought this was, again, granted it was against Mississippi State. That was the best we've seen Carson Beck look all year, besides maybe that second half against Bama and Clemson. He put it together for 4 quarters, had one bad throw in the red zone. Georgia gave him some time in the pocket. He was going through his progressions. He was dicing up Mississippi State when they went to that zone coverage. That's the Carson Beck that we remember back in 2023. I think the bigger storyline is they were able to find some explosive plays, which has been a problem for Georgia in the past. And most importantly, this is how this offense needs to look if you're Georgia in the passing attack. You don't have a Ladd or Brock walking into the building anytime soon right now. It needs to be a committee approach. You take a look. I think you had 6 players catch more than 4 passes against Mississippi State. That's what you need. You need guys like Dylan Bell and Arian Smith and the tight ends getting involved, running backs out of the backfield. That's what we got against Mississippi State. And if you're a Georgia fan, you need that version of Carson Beck and you need that version of this Georgia passing attack to travel to Austin because that's what you're going to need to beat this Texas defense. Where what's the biggest question we have about Texas? It's probably still in the secondary. They've been really good to start the year, but they haven't really faced an elite passing attack. They're going to see one against Georgia Saturday night here.
Yeah, and that's where I think there's a lot more that Texas needs to frankly show on defense in general, just because they really haven't had the opportunity to play a particularly good offense. I mean, there are 2 tough games, if you will, if you want to call Michigan one or Oklahoma one
Not
for
a
that
tough game.
matter.
I would not qualify Michigan as a tough game on offense.
But those are the 2 teams they played. They're very much led from the defense, and their offenses are
Yeah.
both really, really struggling. So again, you like what you've seen from Texas for sure. But you go back to last year, the secondary obviously wasn't great. And I think Makuba's come in and made a huge difference. I think
Yeah.
his ability to play tight ends, play the middle of the field, that was a huge problem. You think of some of those games like that Houston game where that just felt like the middle was wide open consistently. I think he's come in, played better. I think Williams has played better. I think that safety room in general has played a lot better. But again, they still have something to prove, I think, in this Georgia game. Because you look, this as much as Georgia struggled, and I could struggled to an extent, they're still a far better offense than anything Texas has seen.
Yeah, well, 100%. And Texas, we could have started with this. I mean, Texas is allowing 6.3 points per game. So no, everybody wants to talk about Texas. When they talk Texas, they want to talk Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. And I get it. Like, two really good quarterbacks. I would say what is really making this Texas team different in 2024 is how dominant this defense was. You take a look at what they just did at Oklahoma, 3 points, only 239 yards of total offense. The secondary is taking steps. How much have they taken a step is going to be answered Saturday night. Dill, I think the second thing that I'm looking at is, and it's hard. I mean, you ain't going to run the football for 200 yards against Texas. Their front seven, very, very good against the run. I'm not asking Georgia to run the football for 200 yards. What I'm asking Georgia to do is have somewhat of a rushing presence so you can, one, slow down these edge rushers, not like guys like Colin Simmons pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. But I think more importantly, can you work the play action? And Carson Beck was elite on play action against Mississippi State on Saturday afternoon. You want Carson Beck to be able to go to play action in this football game, but you got to be able to run the football effectively to go to the play action. And the Georgia rushing attack, it hasn't been great to start the year if you're a Georgia fan.
In that, I think that's a bit two pronged because frankly, I think the offensive line like maybe isn't playing as good as maybe you would hope. But I also think these running backs just need to play better. I think you think about
Agreed.
when Georgia is really on, their running backs do a really, really good job of churning out yards. And ETN's been able to hit some big runs, I would say. But there have been some times where I think he tries to do too much. It's like, well, just slam it in there and get your 4, because that to me is kind of that's where Georgia's offense is built from. It's built from being able to stay on schedule, get into play action, and use the tight ends. I mean, that's kind of what I think. When I think Georgia, that's what I think of. So again, I think Lawson Lucky's kind of starting to emerge as that guy. I think that's really helpful because Oscar Delp was not giving them enough, to be very frank, and he was the guy taking all the reps. Now that they found that Lawson Lucky, I think, is a bit more, just has a higher upside, is playing more consistent, and I think Carson Beck has a better rhythm with him. I think that's going to be a big kind of addition. If
And also, like, finally, like, how do you want this game to be played if you're Georgia? You don't want to shoot out. Like, I think Georgia has the capability of winning a shootout, but that's not how you want this game to be played against Texas. You want to limit the amount of possessions. You want to control how this game is played. How do you do that? You run the football. You keep this Texas offense off the football field. So I think that's another storyline too, Dill. Let's get into the pick here. This is kind of a Texas at home, only 2.5-point favorite. So what Vegas is telling us right now is that Georgia might be favored on a neutral site. Dill, what's your pick here?
I love the Horns, honestly. I think they're playing. Not only like do they have the complete roster, I think they need to do it. I love what the secondary is now. I still think they need to prove it to me, but I look at it. I think it's much improved. I think they have more continuity. I really like what they have. But I also just look at the way Sark's got this team rolling. It feels like,
It feels different, man.
like a little bit different. I mean, just how he's more calm. I feel like he's more loose. I think this Texas team knows they're really good. I think they've played really good. I think the fact that they haven't at 1 second been even remotely challenged by a couple, like, again, Michigan, Oklahoma, not the best teams in the world, but they're teams that I think can challenge you if you're not playing your best. And Texas just, I haven't really seen any lack of like any dangers, if you will. Something like
there's not many question marks. That's how I'd sum it up. Like, for Texas, you don't have a ton of question marks about what you've seen from them. Georgia, you have the question marks. Now, I'm not going to go as far as what you just said and say I love Texas, because I do not love betting against Georgia and Kirby Smart. It's just not a way to make money, and I've learned that firsthand at times.
I will say the line, it smells a little fishy for sure. Like, I look at this game like, oh, Texas playing so good. Georgia, I mean, they're playing well, but not great. And it's obviously they're pretty much saying Georgia's a better team, I think, with this line. So it is a little fishy, but I just think, again, Texas is like, they just got a different feel to them. They feel more confident.
I think you got to trust your eyes. I think you got to trust your eyes. And like, who's been the better team? We have 6 games of sample size for both of these teams. Texas has looked like the better team, and they're at home. Give me Texas to cover the 2.5 points. Again, I don't love it because I don't love betting against Kirby Smart and this Georgia team, but I think Texas, you're kind of right. To sum it up, Texas looks different. They look like a very confident team that believes that they can beat anybody in the country. And that's something that's different from what we've seen from Texas over the last couple of years to what we've seen from Texas in 2023 and 2024. Boys are both on Texas. That's not a good sign. We'll talk to y'all later. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.